Now, if you're looking for something a little bit different to put into your collection that's still relatively affordable, Xeric watches might be for you. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. I'm talking about a rather interesting watch today that was lent to me by a subscriber called Mark. Thank you so much for Mark for lending me this watch. He's lent me a couple recently, and it is very much appreciated. And it's really much appreciated lending me this particular watch because it's probably not something that I would have ended up buying for myself because it is probably a little bit of an odd watch. It is also a very, very cool looking watch, but it is a watch that may not have ended up in my collection, so it's so nice to be able to get hands on with something so different. This one here is the Xeric Halograph, and it is something very different and rather interesting. And it's a watch that I've enjoyed having some hands-on experience, much more than I expected that I would. Now this one costs $299 and it is still a current production watch from Xeric. So you can check out their website if you are interested in this particular one. It is a quartz chronograph technically, but because of how it looks, because of how it works, it doesn't really feel like a quartz watch to me, which I think is actually a real positive for this one. So because I've only had this one in hand for a short time, I'm just going to do a quick overview of this one, show you some of the interesting features about it. So let's flip the camera and let's check out this rather interesting halograph. So here we have a brand that has grabbed my attention on more than one occasions. This one's the Xeric Halograph Chrono, the Sapphire Gunmetal Lime Edition. Packaging is perfectly fine, just a box, but when you open up the box and see the inner box, that's actually when it starts to get a little bit more interesting. Feels like a sort of a hard felt, and the watch presented quite nicely. At this sort of price range, I'm actually quite impressed with that. So let's have a quick look at this Xeric because it is quirky, different, and it could be that fun watch in your collection. I keep talking about fun watches in your collection because I think it's worth having at least one watch which just brings a big smile to your face. And these guys are definitely giving you an option of that. Check out the dial layout. Check out the time telling. It's just a bit all over the place, isn't it? So how do we actually tell the time on this one? Well, the inner two sort of circumferences there are the hour, so we're looking at 4 there. The outer two are the minutes, so we're looking about just after 10, so 12, so it's going to be 4:12. We then have 3 subdials there because this is a chronograph, as you can see. Now, I haven't spent too much time working on the chronograph, but as you can see, when you activate it, it does move a ticking second hand there. I'm assuming that some of these will then start to add up because as you pause and reset, it has a bit of a slow reset there. But being fun is one thing. Is it well made, however, is a separate thing. And I think this one has a fair bit going for it there too, because when you look closely at the dial, there's a lot of textures and 3D effect. Okay, fun's good. Lime sort of colors are interesting. A little bit of yellow color is interesting. Silver with the name is interesting. We've got lines underneath, subdials, and we've got ridges there. All together, when you bring those all together, it does make it very interesting, fun, and different. And I keep saying that because for me, this probably wouldn't be my everyday watch. This would be that one in the collection that you bring out when you want to have a smile on your face from your watch. But it's not a particularly small watch because the case itself is 44 millimeters. The width of this watch, including that big crystal, and you'll see there's a big domed crystal, is 15 millimeters. The lug to lug is 50 millimeters. The lug width is 20 millimeters. And on this supplied leather strap, we're looking at 90 grams. Now looking at the case, it is this gunmetal sort of gray, which makes it all look very sort of uniform. But the little top bit there is sort of a brushing and there's polishing on the side. But what I like seeing is when you're looking at the side of this one and you turn it, you're seeing that big double domed sapphire crystal. One of the biggest features of this one, because you've got this really cool funky dial going on and it sort of draws in your attention. You've then got this beautiful big domed crystal covering that, which is cool. You've got your chronograph pushers, which are sort of sticking out. They sort of look like sort of aerials, don't they? They're quite funny. And a sort of a vintage style of crown. I call this a vintage style crown because it's a little bit thinner, and I tend to see that on vintage watches. I actually quite like that style. I think it suits chronograph watches. Xeric logo there. When we flip this one around, we got some information about the watch as well, and that was designed in California. Now the lugs on this one are really interesting. They sort of look like old school vintage wire lugs, But let me show you something which I didn't sort of expect, because you almost think this is going to be a solid lug, but it's not. You can see that it is sort of these wire lugs almost. They're quite interesting. Very solid, but just a bit of an interesting feature. The strap is this sort of black leather, which is quite nice. It's got some interesting sort of pattern underneath with the Xeric branding as well. Tells you a bit of information about the watch. That is a Hruodland leather. Nice branded buckle. Really quite nice. A good feature of this watch. And it's very, very comfortable on the wrist. It's actually surprisingly comfortable, probably partly because of the weight, but probably because of sort of how it's sort of spread out, because on paper, big watch. But perhaps having those sort of wire sort of lugs, I guess, makes it a little bit thinner as well, and perhaps that sort of takes away from the larger lug to lug. But I think it's actually quite a fun, nice on-the-wrist experience. So what do I like about this one? What don't I like about it? And what would I change? Well, fun factor. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it again, because that's why you buy this one. I don't think you're buying this one as your everyday watch. And if you do, you're a quirky dude, and I respect you for that. But otherwise, I think it's good as a fun watch in your collection. It's relatively affordable at $299 USD, but I'll talk about that in a moment. And I think it's made really well. It really does feel well made. What don't I like about it? Well, I'm not quite sure about the branding. Xeric is interesting. I guess having had lots of Aliexpress watches, I'm a little bit numb to sort of brand names, so it's not too bad. I kind of like the logo. I think that looks kind of cool. But yeah, probably not my absolute favorite there. I like the color variations though. I like that lime green pop. I think that's fun too. The strap's nice. Obviously, being a quartz watch is probably never going to tick that big box for me because I'm such a mechanical watch fan. But I can certainly see a place for this in collections if you want something, let's say it again, fun but relatively affordable. But at $299, is it actually affordable? Well, for something that is so different, I think it's well priced. For a quartz watch by itself, perhaps it's slightly overpriced. This is definitely one of those ones that you're either going to love it or not love it. And if you love it enough that you want to buy it, then it's probably reasonably priced. Guys, if you enjoyed this watch, maybe you want to watch these videos next.